The choices I make today affect my family's tomorrow. Choosing to build discipline so my children can make wise, godly decisions. Choosing faithfulness. Choosing to lead.
By all accounts, he was the guy that we all want to be as guys. He was handsome and he was brave. He was a warrior. He was romantic. He was romantic and he was confident, and at the same time in his confidence, he had this humility about him. He wrote songs. He wrote poems and songs. He played a musical instrument. Chicks love a guy who plays a musical instrument, especially an electric guitar of that day. Did I mention he writes songs? He was a songwriter and a poet. And he was a faithful friend. And he was loved by his people. Oh, yeah. And he loved to dance. Chicks dig a guy who loves to dance. He was the chosen king of Israel, chosen by God. And he is described by Scripture as a man who was after God's own heart. The only person that I know, particularly in history and Scripture, that was ever described as a man after God's own heart. He was David. He was David, king of Israel, much beloved by his people. And though he was king, it says that in 1 Samuel chapter 11:1, it says that in the spring, on this particular spring, that it says that during this spring, when kings go out to war, David would not be found going out to war, that instead it says he sent his general out and he stayed in Jerusalem on this particular spring. And on this particular night, for whatever reason, he had maybe gone to bed that night and he had gotten up. Maybe it was hot, I don't know. He had gotten up and he had walked out on the balcony of his room, of his palace. And on this particular evening, in this particular spring, he looked down, and what he found was a woman, a young woman. And she was naked and bathing. And the Bible is sure to tell us that she was beautiful. And I'm reminded of a friend of mine who has told me for several decades, I've heard him say, if God knows you have a weakness, or excuse me, if Satan knows you have a weakness for a blonde, he will not send a brunette. She was beautiful. And we don't know how long he stood there, and we don't know how long he watched. We just know it was too long. And he did this thing when the hook was just about to be set, that he asked his messenger, or he told his messenger to go out and find out more about this girl. I don't know what he wanted to find out. I don't think it really matters. When he did find out what he found out, that her name was Bathsheba and that she was the wife of Eliam, who actually ended up being, she was the daughter of one of his 30 brave men. When he finally found out that she was who she was and that she was married, it didn't matter anyway. And that's important. Because, see, by this time, David had looked long enough. David's feet had stayed in that place. His eyes had beheld her, and he had stayed where he should not have stayed. He was not where he should have been. He was not where his responsibilities lay. And his feet were not where they should have been. They should have turned. They should have walked away after the first glance. His eyes were not where they should have been. And so all the information thing was really actually irrelevant at that time. He really didn't care who she was. did not care that she was married to this man who was a soldier named Uriah. And so he invited Bathsheba. He had Bathsheba brought to his room. And with no doubt the candles on and the air filled with aromas and the skies filled with all types of lies, he might have conversation with her. I don't know what went on that night, except to know that evening, it says, the Bible says, rather euphemistically, that he slept with her. And I don't think David was interested in sleeping that night, if you know what I mean. What happened that night with candles burning and the sky filled with all kinds of lies and his mind filled with lies and his heart filled with all kinds of lies about whatever, that she could meet needs in his life that his other wives could not meet. That there was going to be something about this that was going to be over the top, better than anything it had ever been, that he could be something for her that he was not. I don't know what was in his mind. All I know is this, that it says he slept with her. And what happened, and I want to make sure that you are clear with this. I want to make sure that you understand, that we understand, that what David did was he took his penis and he placed it into the vagina of this young woman, Bathsheba. Adultery is defined as voluntary sexual relations between a married person and a person who is not his or her spouse. Sexual immorality is defined as voluntary sexual relations between a man and a woman outside the covenant of marriage. And Jesus, just like Jesus does, like better than ever, but you would kind of expect that, him being the Son of God and all. Jesus gets to the heart of this matter. Jesus gets to the very, very heart of this matter in Matthew 5:27-28, when he says, "You have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery." And he doesn't argue with that. He just takes it a step further. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Not too many chapters later, the book of Matthew says this, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts." Jesus shows us what's at the heart of the matter and what's at the heart of God in the matter. And then Matthew 15:19 says, this is a matter of the heart. It's not a matter just of sexual parts. It's not just a matter of desire. It's just a matter of the heart. For out of the heart, he says, come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. Dennis Rainey says this, an affair is, catch this, an attempted escape from reality or a search for meaning outside the marriage. And because, let's just be clear this morning. Let's just be honest, because marriage is tough. Because it's got to be worked out every single day. Because the reality of marriage is a hard thing. It requires work. Because sometimes we are trying to find meaning within marriage and doesn't always feel like it's there. Because there is an evil one and he is after us and he is after our marriages and after our family. Because of all those things, folks, you and I, is vulnerable. We are vulnerable. And if we think not, then we are even more vulnerable, if not on the edge of stupid. Here's why we're vulnerable. Here's how we get vulnerable. We get vulnerable because sometimes we just don't understand sometimes our spouse and their needs. We don't understand some of the things that they need in their life that God has created in that we need to be working hard to meet those needs. Sometimes we become vulnerable because we get lazy. You know, sometimes we know the needs. And I'm just going to assume the best motive, but just say sometimes we just don't want to put out the effort, do we, to meet the needs of the spouse that we have. It's just easier being selfish, right? Man, you all are quiet this morning. Sometimes we become vulnerable because of lies. Man, that hurts. Because we begin to believe lies. Because we begin to believe that our needs are not being met the way that they should be. And sometimes we begin to believe the lies because one of the very first things that has to happen, one of the very first things that has to happen when we begin to think about moving from our marriage into a relationship that is outside the covenant of marriage is that we have to sacrifice truth on the altar. Truth is always sacrificed prior to adultery. Always. Truth cannot reign where adultery is trying to take seat. We believe the kind of lies that she'll always look that way. We believe the type of lies, men, that she'll always meet our needs. This person will always meet our needs the way my wife can't meet our needs, my needs. That sex will always be this good, and over here there's almost nothing. Gals, we believe, I think, the lies as gals sometimes, maybe that it's all his fault and none mine. That this person will always be this incredible listener and so engaged like he is right now. He hasn't heard your take out the trash voice yet. I'm sorry. Strike that for second service. And you know what? We become vulnerable because when we become alone, when we become alienated. Let me just tell you something that I have seen over and over again, and that is this. People who are considering adultery, who are beginning to inch that way, who are taking steps, who are beginning to be so dissatisfied with their marriage that they are beginning to be open to other relationships, will almost every time will separate themselves from the relationships on earth that will tell them the truth about what they were doing. And they will separate themselves in some way from God. They will stop serving, they will stop reading, they will stop fellowshipping because they do not want to hear the truth. And we become vulnerable when those things happen. Even if we don't have the plans to do it, when those things happen in our life, we become vulnerable to those kind of things. Hey, here's what I want to challenge you to do today. Here's the challenge. We're talking about home choices. Home choices. Here is my challenge. That as a follower of Jesus, I am making the decision to be faithful to God, my spouse, and my family by building safeguards into my marriage. I want to talk about adultery, but what I really want to talk about today with you is how we can build some things in our marriage that will make it again satisfying, that will make it again God-honoring, that will make it again, that will bring an element of health, that we will do the things necessary. And there's nothing that's foolproof. There are people in healthy marriages that still step out into adulterous situations. I realize that. But boy, I'm telling you what, we can sure shut the vulnerability doors pretty doggone tight if there are some things that we'll do. So here's what I want to talk about for the next few minutes. And some of these things you've never heard before, and some of these things are just reminders, and that's okay if you've heard them before. I think we need to hear them again. It's just some things that I feel like you need to know and do to affair-proof your marriage. Guys, I'm going to start with you. All right? Everybody listening? Got your pen in hand? For the woman that you're married to, it's all about love. For the woman that you are married to, it is all about love. If the book of the Bible does not say a whole lot of things actually about marriage. I mean, it really doesn't. There's a lot of illustrations or a lot of, couples that you see, but there's not a lot about the relationship of marriage. But when it does, wow, it's there and it's powerful. And we've said that we've gone here before, but I'm going to go here again, that when we go to Ephesians 5, we find 8 or 10 verses in Ephesians 5, and here's what it says, guys. Check this out. Husbands, Ephesians 5:25, love your wives as Christ loved the church. 5:28, In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. Wow, that's a sermon in itself. He who loves his wife loves himself. Ephesians 5:33. However, each of you also must, see what's coming? Love his wife as he loves himself. 4 times in about 8 verses. God says, men, love your wives. Maybe he knows we can be a little thick on this sometimes. You think? Love your wife. Love your wife. Love your wife. Love your wife. Here's the most important thing. Here's the most important thing. Because we would automatically respond, well, I love my wife. And yet the truth of the matter is there's a lot of women who, if you ask them and they were honest, and I hear this often, do you feel love within the marriage? And they would say this, not really. They might say, oh, I know he loves me, but I don't feel loved. And you got a problem there. And so here's the most important thing, guys. Here's the most important thing. I mean, really honestly, you could hear this and walk out, and if you put it in practice, you'd be in pretty good shape. Here's what your wife wants to know. Here's what your wife wants to know. Am I the most important person or thing in your life other than Jesus Christ? That's what they want to know. Am I the most important person or thing in your life other than Jesus Christ? And if they feel that they are, you're probably in pretty good shape. And if they feel like they're not, we have some work to do. And that's why, really, on a practical note, that's why, because girls know that we kind of get in a rut, or we kind of get, in one area, and we're just focused in that particular area. And so that's why when we'll take the time as a guy in the middle of the day to send a little text and say, hey, I'm just thinking about you. When we send that text that says, hey, I can't wait to be home with you this evening. Looking forward to seeing you at the door. Just want you to know I'm thinking about you. That means the world. Because they know that in the middle of everything that we're doing and all the focus that we are on our job or whatever it is, that somehow they came to mind. And girls love coming to mind. They like being, they desire to be. It is the way that we show love for them is that they believe that they are the most important person or thing in their life. Here's the second thing they need to know. They want to know this. Do you need me? Do you need me? Now, we do this thing as this guy sometimes where, and it's a natural thing. And it's a good thing, except it's a bad thing. How's that for a mystery? I mean, we get this thing. I was like, we hear something, we receive some news, the salary's going to be cut, we're going to have less hours, we got a bill in, something broke down, and what's our thing? Okay, hey, I'll take care of this. I don't want to burden her with this. And where it seems to be a decision of strength and a wise decision to us, it actually often sends a message to her, you don't need me. You believe that you can take care of everything by yourself. They want to share that burden with us because it says to them, you need me. Women desire to be needed. It is one of the main primary ways that they feel loved. Ask your wife, do you believe that I need you? Better sit back and listen. Okay? What's something that I do that tells you you don't need me? I don't need you. That's a good question to ask. Next thing I want you to know, guys, before we go into the girls for just a second, I want you to know this, that talk isn't cheap. Talk isn't cheap, and that's a good thing because they speak about 50,000 words a day. Talk is not cheap for a girl. It is for a woman the primary gauge that they use to know whether they are connected with us and we are connected with them. It's that love thing again. Talk isn't cheap. They talk for a reason. We like to think that girls just like to talk. They talk for a reason. They talk because, one book says, because it's the way that they process their problems. If a woman has a problem, she processes that problem by hearing herself verbalize about that. And that's why a group of women sound like crows when they're all together. And it sounds like rude people talking on top of one another to us as guys. We don't do that. And we're the ones who are supposed to be relational idiots. Because girls want to hear themselves. In fact, they have to hear themselves kind of verbalize the problem. That's how they get from I got a problem to I got an answer. And in the middle of that is when they're verbalizing, they like to have all these little reflectors around them that reflects the emotions and reflects the thoughts or whatever, okay? Not fixing the problem. Women are from Venus, men are from Mars. Mike from Last Man Standing says, I know women don't like us to fix things. That's why there's so many broken things on Venus. They like to have all these reflectors. They like to have all these people saying, oh, I can't believe you did that. What do you think you're going to do? How are you feeling about that? Whatever. And so, obviously, again, when they come home and they're sharing all their problems, and because we love them, we automatically go, well, I'll tell you what you ought to do. Oh. Some of this family ministers' worst mistakes in marriage have been made making that statement. Well, I know you're having a hard time disciplining the boys today, Dawn. All 4 of them for 12 hours while I was doing whatever I was doing. Here's probably what you should have done, honey. I'll just let your minds run on that one. And so they need us to set, and they need us to do, I think, a couple things. One, to recognize basically the emotion that they're feeling. As I just learned I learned something, a little while ago. It hadn't been very long ago. I learned this, if Dawn, if our wife is, we're listening for the emotion, or hey, it sounds like you're really upset about this. Yeah, I am upset. It sounds like you're really frustrated about this. Yeah, I am. It sounds like that was really disappointing to you. They love that because it says that you're hearing beyond the words to what I'm feeling inside. And there's something I learned too. I learned that I used to believe that I had to feel like she felt. And I realized, no, I don't have to feel like she felt. I just have to recognize that she feels the way she feels. And I have to realize something too. Guys, catch this, okay? Because we make a big mistake on this one. We have to recognize the bigness of the ball. The bigness of the ball, and that is this, all right? If it seems like a big thing to her, then guess what, guys? It's a big thing. Let's try that, because I don't think you got that. If it seems like a big thing to her, it's a big thing. Is it a little thing? No. And woe to the man who would declare something that is a big thing to his wife a little thing. Well, honey, that's not that big of a, oh no, don't go there, don't go there. If it's a big thing to her, it's a big thing. Yeah. Come on. She'll be up here preaching in just a second. Big rocks and little rocks. If it's a big rock to her, it's a big rock. Doesn't have to be a big rock to you, but you got to treat it and you got to verbalize it. It's a big rock to her. Hey, I was thinking about the other day. I was thinking about this whole thing because we have a hard time as guys sometimes like understanding this whole emotion, reflective emotion stuff. It's like the language you use is even kind of funky for it. And I was realizing, I don't know if this will make sense to you. You ever remember throwing a ball back and forth with your friend when you were growing up, throwing a baseball or something, or a football? And you're just throwing, and it's just kind of throwing. He throws and you throw. And somehow, although you're really not stating it, you end up throwing at the same kind of speed that they throw. If they throw they're just soft throwing a little bit, you're soft throwing. Pretty soon, what happens? They start throwing a little harder. Are you soft throwing now? No, man. You're picking it up. You're picking it up. Pretty soon, man, the man thing comes in, all right? And man, they're firing away. Well, if they're firing away, you're not soft throwing. You're firing away back, and it's kind of like that. We have to have this kind of little feeling in us, when women are talking about the things that are going on. We got to, that if it's something, if they're soft throwing, then we kind of go, oh, we're soft throwing back to them. But if they're intense about it, we have to realize, oh man, you're kind of intense. You must really feel strongly about that. They like that. It says, hey, his head and heart is in the game. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Well, guys, one last thing before I go on, and that is this. And this really is, I can make fun of it, but it's so serious, it's hard to. I hear this a lot. A guy will be involved, a guy will be talking to someone at work, and that someone is a girl. And the wife is upset about it, and he can't understand why the wife is upset about it. And here's what he does, and it's another one of those whoa moments. Matter of fact, it's about 3 times bigger than the whoa moment, okay? And I can see it coming, and I can see he's going to drop this line, and he thinks it's going to make everything better. And you know what the line is? I bet the girls do. And the guy says, honey, don't worry about it. There's no reason for you to worry. She's just a friend. And he thinks all of a sudden she's going to go, oh, I was so silly. She's just a friend. Come over here and let me just kiss you. Come over here and I'm going to kick you. She's just a friend. You know why? Real simply. Because your wife wants to be your best friend. And if there's any thought in her that you are sharing information, little stuff or big stuff, fun stuff or serious, with another person who is a woman, she does not feel like the most important person in your life. Because she gauges that relationship by your willingness to share your life with her. Little stuff, big stuff. Bad line. Hey, let's talk about the girls for just a second before we go on, all right? Okay, girls, I know we seem sometimes like we don't know much, but I think there's some things about guys that really need to be reminded of, honestly. Here's what I think you need to know. I think you need to be reminded, one, again, that it's all about respect. Okay, it's all about love for your hearts, and it's all about respect for ours. And Ephesians 5:22 says, wives, submit yourselves, which is basically the response because you respect us, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. It's almost the same thing it tells to the husbands. Love them as Christ loved the church. And then he ends this whole passage with, in Ephesians 5:33, the wife must respect her husband. The wife must respect her husband. And you know what? It doesn't say in the middle anything to you. And I think that's because God knows you guys are just talking throughout most of the middle of it anyway. But he starts at the beginning, and he ends this passage with a word to women, a word to the wives. And I was just saying, I really wish I had more time to unfold this, unpack this idea, but I'm just going to say this. Okay, if you want something practical, here's the thing. Watch your voice, because we are readers of your voice. And we know the voice that we are attracted to, and we know the voice that wooed us, and we know the voice that says, I love you and I desire you and I'm glad that you're my man. We know that voice. We love that voice. That voice resonates in us. And we know your other voice. We know the nagging voice. We know we didn't hear that for a long, long time. That just started in the last few years. We know your mama voice. And I haven't met a man yet who wants to go to bed with his mama. Sorry. It's your voice. And you express all kinds of things. And again, if I had a little bit more time, we'd take a look at Proverbs, where the adulterous woman wins the man over by her soothing words. Doesn't take a piece of clothes off. It's all about the words and her eyes. And that's the second thing. Your voice and your eyes. We look in your eyes. We look in your eyes. We look in your eyes, and when we look in your eyes, we look in your eyes and we see desire, we see respect. I'm not talking about this crazy, blatant sexual desire constantly. That's not what it's about. We see respect there. We see, I'm glad I'm with you. We see, I'm glad I came with you to the party. We see, I'm glad that you're my friend. I'm glad that we're here together, that you have my hand. That's what we see. And then we see the other. We see the frustration, you blew it again. Oh, you didn't follow through with that again. You didn't take care of what you're supposed to take care of. Oh, really? Again? You're not gonna, again? We see that. We hear it in your voice. We see it in your eyes. And as much as our lack of ability or some unwillingness sometimes to verbalize with you breaks your heart and makes you feel unconnected, women, I'm telling you, that same thing in your eyes is a complete disconnect for us because we sense the disrespect that God placed within our hearts that we want so badly. Last thing is this: remember our boxes, okay? Remember our boxes, Gabe. I know we've talked about this before, but we really are where women can be in all kinds of different situations at one time, and they're multitaskers, and they can be, putting the green beans on and changing the diaper and helping the kid with homework and doing brain surgery at the same time on another child, I mean, they just got that in them. We are in our box, and we have our boxes. We have our work box. We have our daddy box. We have our marriage box. We have our recreation box. And yeah, let's just go ahead and say we've got our sex box, and we love our sex box and we love to be in our sex box. It's a good box for us. We like that box. And you know what? I'm just going to say it. And you can laugh if you want. That's all right. We sense a lot of respect and a lot of desire. We hope to, at least, in that sex box. When we look in your eyes, when we look in your eyes and we are engaged physically and you're somewhere else, or your eyes say, I wish I wasn't there, here, let's get this over and turn out the lights, the message is sent. Physical pleasure is there, but the message is sent. That's just the way it is. And so remember that we have both feet in one box, and we really can't do this and have one foot in one box and one foot in the other box. We have to do this. And so it takes us a while to make this transmission. You'll hear some gears, turning sometimes. And so when we're over here and you automatically start talking about something else and we seem a little slow to get there or uninterested, really honestly, we're not trying to be rude. You just got to take us, and sometimes it may be 2 or 3 boxes over, And and so we have to you have to give us some time. And I've shared this before, but really truly, if I'm watching a ball game, you got to understand about guys. Guys are not watching a ball game. Guys are in the ball game. We are on the field. I don't care whether we're 10 or 50. We are in that game, and we're right there for the tackle. We're waiting. We're right there for the dunk. And all of a sudden you go, Steve. Actually, a lot of times I don't want to name it. I just hear something that she wants me to hear. Is Dawn here right now? Leave this out, second service. All right. And all of a sudden she's like, why aren't you listening to me? I'm like, hey, I'm getting ready to make the tackle. And so I just say, hey, something simple. You just want to say, make sure you get our attention. Call our name. Don't just start a conversation and assume that we can change this. Oh, good listener box. Ain't happening. All right. Remember our boxes, one box at a time. And we probably met you in our rec box. We probably became best friends with you in our rec box. I'm not saying we shouldn't be responsible. I'm just saying every time we're with you and we have a conversation with you and everything, always comes back to a box of responsibility, a box of, did you take care of this? A box of, oh, we're going to get this done this weekend, a honey-do box. Okay, I'm just telling you, that's not where we found our best friend. And it's hard to maintain a best friend for us if it's always about the rec box, the work box, the got to get something done. Did you take care of this box? So I encourage wives, crawl into our rec box. I didn't say sex box. I said rec box. Because that's where we found our best friend. And that's probably where our best friend most of our life will be. I want to make sure I don't give you a formula. I want to make sure I don't give you a formula, but I want you to know, I really believe this. It's not, these ideas are not my own, but I'm going to tell you that we have taken some couples who were really, really far down and out. And they begin to have this understanding of what God created in their spouse. And they begin to ask God to work in them and begin to meet those needs, even though it was difficult and not natural. And there is some tremendous healing that happens when these things begin to be a regular part of our marriage. So I'm just going to encourage you to go back. Maybe you've taken some notes or whatever. Go back and listen to it again, on the stream and put some of these things. I'm just going to tell you, bang, shang-a-lang. Bang, shang-a-lang. Bang, shang-a-lang means I think there's going to be some good things happen in your marriage that you probably didn't even realize were possible. Bang, shang-a-lang. Folks, adultery and sexual immorality are sin. I want to make that clear. It's not because Steve says so, it's because the Scripture is clear of it. I asked my administrative assistant to give me the Scriptures in the Bible on adultery and sexual immorality, and I was expecting a couple pages. She gave me 6 or 12. I can't remember. It was a small book. Every time. Adultery is wrong. Sexual immorality. Marriage outside the covenant, sex outside the covenant of marriage. I don't care how you feel about the person. I don't care how practical it is. I don't care how much money you're saving. The Bible says it is wrong. It is against the heart of God. Adultery is not only wrong, folks, it's destructive. Proverbs 6:32 says, but a man who commits adultery has no sense. Not even a little sense. No sense, and whoever does so destroys himself. He destroys himself. He destroys his marriage. Can't stay the secret alone. Destroy your children if they're there, whether they're small or whether they're adult. You destroy their hearts, and you destroy the integrity of the church. And the church is the body of Christ. So you take a pretty good whack at God when you begin to make those decisions, no matter how innocent they seem. When you step that way, what you're doing is wrong, and it is sin. And it is destructive to everyone involved. And there may seem to be a winner, but there's not. There are sermons that can be preached on the consequences of David's sin. But what we do find that is in Psalm 51, and actually 7 or 8 Psalms leading up to Psalm 51, David seems to be dealing with the consequences of his sin. Even physical discomfort, physical pain that God has caused for him to wake up and see what he's done. But it says that Nathan, his friend, comes to him, and in Psalm 51, we read these words, among others. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. David's saying, I've sinned, and my sin is against you, and I know I am vulnerable. Grant me a steadfast spirit. Sustain me through this, because this temptation is going to come again, God. Restore to me the joy of your salvation. And I realized a couple things. I realized, one, that this is a confession of a man who knows the wrongness of what he has done. And yet I realized, and I've never ever seen this before, but I also realized that some of these things he asked for, the lack of joy, the Holy Spirit's presence. Some of these things begin to happen in our lives that make us actually, their absence make us vulnerable to adultery. It's the spiritual things in our life that make us vulnerable. And his response is to confess. His response is to confess his sin when Nathan comes to him. He confesses to Nathan and he confesses to God. I'd like to think he confesses to his wives, although we're not told that. And I'll tell you, folks, that for sexual sin, it's got to come out in the open. You won't walk away from adultery on your own unless you tell somebody who will hold your feet to the fire. In case some of us are feeling amazingly self-righteous because we have never been adulterers, let me remind you that over and over again throughout the Scriptures, that God talks to people, his people, and say, you are adulterers. Because you have stepped outside your rightful covenant relationship with me and looked after other things, other idols, other stuff for your pleasure. It's adultery. So we're all guilty. We're all guilty in one way or the other of adultery. We all have to come clean, and none of us can stand self-righteous. We all have all made a choice to go outside the relationship that we have with the God who will meet our every single need, and somehow be convinced that he cannot, and that we have to have this need, whatever it is, be met outside the relationship we have with the perfect God who is content and capable of meeting our every need. So we're all guilty. So it's all confession to be made. Confession and a leaning again against the grace of God because of what Christ has done on the cross. I encourage you to make a choice that you will build the safeguards into your relationship with your spouse that need to be there so that you can affair-proof your marriage